breath. Right, okay, let's start. Right. The normal deal with open evening is you'll come into a room, cluster around, and I'll talk to you for 15 minutes about how great Classic is. COVID has killed that for this year. So instead, we're recording an open evening tape online. So you're quite possibly watching this at home. Actually, I'm recording in front of an audience of hostage year 11 students who stumbled into the room for an elective, and I've used them as a live audience. But most likely you're listening at home. I'm doing it in one take. It's the end of the day. At the end of the half term, I can barely get my words out. So there will be flood lines and repetitions and stutters. I'm hoping there's a bit of energy that will make up for that. Let's just go. Right, welcome to Classical Civilization. First thing that normally happens is I have a whole lot of parents in the room looking very anxious and very concerned. What is this strange subject? We've never heard of it. Will it get our daughters and our sons their A-level? Will they ever leave our home so that we can carry on with our lives again? Will they ever go off to university? So I don't really care about the grades in and of themselves. They're not the most important thing. What's important is that you enjoy the course. But our grades are outstanding. You know, if you look at the last 3 years, 100% A star to B, 94% A star to B, one girl got a C, 100% A star to B. And honestly, you could actually go back 20 years. And I reckon in the last 20 years, we've had 2 or 3 C grades. I think we got 1 D once, but almost overwhelmingly entirely, it is B to A star. We get extraordinarily good results. The results are not the end of it, but the results are just a stepping stone to your university. But we give you that key to unlock your university dreams. Our results are outstanding. What else is pretty good about us? Oxbridge. There are excellent universities other than Oxbridge. The point about Oxbridge is they are pretty much the best in the world. Class Civ will get you into any course on Oxbridge. This year, 14 UCED students got into Oxbridge. Of those 14 students, 10 of them did Class Civ A-level. Only 2 of them actually applied for classics. Two of them are reading classics. One started this year. One of them's having a year out. She's in Rome right now, and then she's going to read classics next year. The other 10, I think 6 of them are doing English. A couple are doing things like PPE, politics, philosophy, and economics. Often, I think one was doing Spanish and Arabic or something like that. Psychology is quite popular. So you don't have to apply for classics with Class Civ, but Class Civ will get you into your university of choice and your course of choice. It will get you. We've had students go off to Harvard and Yale. We've had students go off to European universities. Whatever university you want to study, whatever course you want to study, Class Civ will get you on it. I just quote one ex-student, Safi. She's just tremendously good. She went off and did an Oxford Law degree. You can't get more hardcore than an Oxford Law degree. One of the toughest degrees at one of the top universities in the world. Her interview, she came out of her interview in tears. They shredded her, which was reassuring, I think, because they would only have been that aggressive. They thought she was good and could take it. But you know, she went through it. She came back after 3 years and said, "You must tell your students every single skill that I needed to survive 3 years of an Oxford Law degree, I had already learned on the Class Civ A-level." And you've got to tell them that. I've always thought that the Class Civ A-level it's the Oxbridge of the A-levels. It's a little bit harder. It's a little bit faster than the other A-levels. There's a reason I taught this quickly, because there's so much of the syllabus we've got to get done, and the pressure and the intensity is really quite extreme. I don't like it. It's a difficult A-level. I think it's harder than history. I think it's harder than English. But the point is, you are excellent students. And the more you are challenged, the better you become, which is why we get 100% A star to B. It's why we get, I should have said in that last stat, you know all the shenanigans about the government algorithm about grades? Even under the government algorithm, we had 100% A star to B because our past year grades have been so good, they couldn't deny us them. And then when it went back to the censor assessed grades, we still had 100% A star to B, just more A stars and more A's because we have more faith in our students than the government did. But even under their, much disputed and much argued about algorithm, we still had 100% A star to B because our track record is excellent. We get you into your course of choice. I don't care whether you go off and do classics or go off and do psychology. I just want you to go off and be happy at university and go on with your life. We'll get you there. What's happening next? Let's find out. Oh, our present students. It's a flourishing subject. In many schools, Class Civ is taught to 4 students after hours as a teeny tiny sort of elected option. We've got something like 56, 58 students, and it's growing. Literally this week, one of the boys has dropped the A-level he started with. He sampled a couple of the Class Civ lessons. He's decided to jump ship to Class Civ instead, and he's going to spend half term catching up and be up to date when he comes back after the half term. This isn't all our students. 3 or 4 of them were self-isolating with the COVID. Another couple were just off sick. So we've got more than that. The top bit there are the year 13 students. There are 2 year 12 classes. We've got 2 classes in year 12, we've got 2 classes in year 13. A few years ago, that would have been 1 class of 20 odd students, but we've actually got the money now that you're getting basically private school size classes. Our A-level classes are about 12 to 14 students, which is the ideal number of students from A-level class. Small enough you get one-to-one attention, large enough that there's buzz and energy in the room. So it's a flourishing subject. And also we've gone back to 5 lessons. A few years ago, A-level shrunk down to 4 lessons across the week. It's now 5 lessons in year 13. So you get 4 lessons in year 12, 5 lessons in year 13. You get good sized classes. You are pretty much, it astonishes me in some ways, you're getting private school classes and one-to-one support that you would normally pay 20, 30 grand for a year at a public school like Dulwich College down the road. So we're really good. Are we really good? Let's see what the students say. They're going to say we're really good.
Hi, I'm a Year 13 classics student, and my favourite thing about this subject is that it helps me in all of my other subjects.
And my favourite thing about classics is how relevant the texts are to modern day.
We also really like how the teachers give us sweets sometimes, and it's very motivating.
Yes, indeed. Studies show that if you give students chocolate or cake, they automatically assume the lesson is more important than if you don't, and they learn better. Just take you through very quickly. All right, you know Oedipus the King. We've had a lesson where we talked about the plot of Oedipus the King. These are just some of the A-levels Oedipus the King sports. It's the first play I teach in Year 13. RS, Oedipus is a good king. He's a good king. He's a good husband. He's a good son. He's a good father. He's an excellent king. He loves all of these people. He's fated before he's born that he is going to kill his father and marry his mother. It's the problem of evil. Why do good people suffer in this world? Why do the gods stand by and let good people suffer? Or why do the gods even cause suffering? So if you're doing RS or RPE, I think as they call it now, in a rebranding, it's the problem of evil. So Cassidy got there first. Psychology, the Oedipus complex. Narcissism, the Electra complex. Art is catharsis. In Oedipus the King, Thebes is suffering from the plague. Athens had suffered the plague the year before Oedipus the King. So as they watch this play about a city-state suffering the plague, they're processing their trauma and their grief are the ones that they lost during the COVID, during the plague of the time. The famous Athenian politician Pericles, he dies in that plague. In the play Oedipus, the greatest politician of Thebes, he gets destroyed in that. So it's clearly using art as therapy to explore trauma and grief and loss, which is psychology. History, we don't just look at Oedipus the King as an English play, what makes it dramatic, what makes it moving, what makes it frightening, but we also look at it as a historical source. Athens gets rid of the kings and invents democracy. In Oedipus the King, Oedipus is hated by the gods. He's cursed by the gods. The way you save Thebes from the plague is at the end of the play, you drive the king away. You can see how that's a metaphor for getting rid of kings and having democracy. The way they decide who wins the play is they cast votes, like they would cast votes in the assembly. So you get the skills of historical source analysis alongside the skills of literary analysis from English. Government and politics, like I said, the Athenians meant democracy. Mussolini, again back to history. Mussolini used to pretend that he was related to Hercules, that he wrestled lions like Hercules did. So all these later politicians and systems like fascism. The word fascism comes from the word fasces, a Roman symbol of strength and unity. It's a bunch of sticks. You can break a single stick, but a bunch of sticks together, you can't break them. That's the fasces, a symbol of strict Roman strength, becomes the word fascism. A book came out last year arguing how the alt-right in America, the far-right militia groups and stuff like that, have co-opted and used lots of the classical imagery and stuff in their propaganda exercises. Quite disturbing in many ways. So we've done history, we've done English, done government politics. Medicine, well, as I said, art therapy. If you go to Epidaurus on a Greek trip, if we ever do those again, Epidaurus is a medical sanctuary. You will see some of the first ever medical instruments, some of the first ever scalpels. You will read about some of the first ever medical cases of somebody who had deafness and had that good. But there's also a theatre there, because they recognise that theatre helped you come to terms with your illness, come to terms with trauma, and so it does interconnect to that. If you're doing English, one of the set poems in English is about takes you to Delphi, which is a Greek sanctuary, takes you to Lourdes in France, which is a Catholic sanctuary of medical healing. And so you see I'm not going to lie to you and say that medicine is what we mostly talk about, but several of my students have gone off to be doctors and surgeons and dentists and psychologists and that kind of stuff. So it works to support that. Art, we do art history. I'll show you in a few slides' time that we actually look at vase paintings and statues alongside text. So you will learn the skills of quoting a bit of a picture alongside quoting a line of poetry or quoting a line from a place. One of the students went off to do Cambridge art history a few years ago. So all of those things. EPQs. One of my girls in year 12 right now, she's thinking of doing an EPQ on how WWE wrestling resembles Greek myths. Another one won an essay competition on how Socrates' suicide was the most important contribution to Western philosophy ever. Another one did an EPQ on about whether or not you can find strands of feminist theory in classical Athenian literature. And the nice thing about the EPQ is often universities will drop a grade. If the university offers 3 A's, do an EPQ, you might get 2 A's in the B's you offer. So you can pick a subject of whatever interests you, research it over the summer, write up the essay, and it will help you get into university. And Classic gives you a number of options for that. So it supports all the subjects. It really does. I mean, the Greeks got there first and did it best. So whatever you think of doing, Classic will help you. What's happening now? Okay, the course. Miss Vickers teaches the epic. She teaches you the Odyssey in year 12. She teaches you Virgil's Aeneid in year 13. I teach 2 units. Greek theatre in year 12, which is Greek tragedy and Greek comedy, and some vase pages. Then love and relationships in year 13, which is a slice of philosophy, law cases, love letters, funeral eulogies, a real mishmash of sources again. So again, like history, you're not just looking at literary sources, you're looking at court transcripts. A lot of my students go off to become lawyers and barristers and stuff like that and apply for law at university. And they can write in their personal statements that they've studied some of the first ever murder trials. They've studied some of the first ever adultery trials. We look at those in the love and relationships unit. So those are the 3 units. In year 12, we do Greek theatre and epic. In year 13, when you're all grown up, we do the love and relationships unit. Quite nice for you lot, there's actually study guides. For the first time in 20 years, there's actually official study guides to help with the course. So it gets easier still. As I said, it's not an easy course. It's a fast-moving, high-end academic course, but there is help. Excellent expert teachers, study guides. They are very good. They make mistakes now and then, but they are good. Parental advisory, explicit content. It was stuck on my door a few years ago. You have to understand it's a grown-up course. There are several reasons why we don't offer it at GCSE. One is you've been at the school for 5 years, most of you, and so it's nice to have new subjects at A level. If you were having the normal open evening, I would be urging you to go and listen to the psychology talk, the government and politics talk, the economics talk, the class div talk. Listen to the talks on those subjects you haven't had lessons in, that you're not familiar with. But the other reason why there is a class div GCSE, but we don't teach it, partly to give you a fresh option at A level, but also a lot of it is very adult. Oedipus is making love to his mother. She then kills herself. The point of Greek comedy is to be as rude as possible about everything you can think of. Every swear word you wouldn't dream of saying in class is said on the Greek stage. And so you've got to understand, it is an adult course. And better you understand that now than you sign up for the course and then run out blushing and screaming in horror after 3 lessons when the fluids start flying, mostly blood, to be honest. Okay, Sophocles, Oedipus King, Bacchae, they're the 2 tragedies we look at. Think about Greek tragedies. Everyone thinks it's sort of this high art form. They're basically just the horror films of the day. This is an extract from the 3rd play we studied, Bacchae, where the son is being ripped apart and eaten alive by his mother and his aunts. And of course, it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for the anxiety about how your parents destroy you, all the ways they've let you down and made you anxious and whatever. But it's also a zombie movie. Grabbing his left arm below the elbow, Agave put a foot against the wretched man's ribs and tore his shoulder out of its socket. Ino was destroying the other side of his body, tearing his flesh. The whole crowd of Bacchants took hold of him. They all shouted out together, Pentheus screaming as long as he still had breath, and the Bacchants howling in triumph. One of them was carrying a forearm, one a foot with a sandal still on it. His ribs were laid bare by the tearing, and all the women, bloody-handed, were playing catch with the flesh of Pentheus. We talked a few weeks ago about, fear of women and the patriarchal fear of women. That's what's happening in this extract. That the boy king is being overwhelmed and ripped apart by a crowd of crazy, mad, deranged women. And it's a metaphor for the patriarchal fear of women's emotions, the patriarchal fear that women will rise up and rebel and seize back the power they once had. As I said, in my unit, we also do vases, because this myth of Pentheus being ripped apart and eaten alive, it's really famous. So a couple of 100 years before the play was written, this vase was painted. But there's Pentheus being ripped apart. You can see his guts falling out there. This woman to the left is running off with his foot. And it's one of the set vases. So you might get a question saying, which is more effective in conveying the horror of this scene? That passage of literature, that passage of prose I've just read you, or this picture? And you would quote details like Pentheus's guts falling out. You'd quote the woman running off with his foot in her hand, or the satyr there holding up his hands in horror and grief at what he's witnessing. On the other side of the vase is the god Dionysus has made this happen, and he's just sitting down smiling, having a glass of wine. And it again shows you the cruelty of the gods and the power of the gods. As this boy is being torn apart and eaten alive by his mother, Dionysus is just there smiling about it. And so it becomes the problem of evil and the nature of the gods and so on. But it's high art, but it is also just schlocky horror. Horror, shock, frenzy, devastation. They're just quotations from that previous page. So it's a horror movie, but a high-class art house horror movie. What's it? Greek comedy. You lot who are listening to me in the room, you will understand this from the 6th form view. Remember you know what the school expects? That all through the term, you will be polite, you will obey the rules, you will respect your teachers. Then at the end of the year, you get to dress up as your teachers, you get to mock their speech patterns, you get to mock their dress, you get to mock their lessons. Everyone sits around, laughs at it at Christmas time, and goes off feeling better. That's the point of Greek comedy. That for one day of the year, you can be extraordinarily rude about the gods, about politicians, whatever, so that the rest of the year, you obey the gods, you are moderate, you're quiet in your life. What have I got news for you? Mock the Week, Best of the Now show. All of those shows are topical political satire. That's what Greek comedy does. They'd be having a field day right now with Brexit and the handling of the pandemic and the American elections. Spitting Image has just come back. Spitting Image, that program of grotesque comic satire. Those are what comedy masks would look like. All the tragic actors wearing serious masks, comedy actors are wearing grotesque caricature masks. So in the first play of Aristophanes, he takes on the major politician of the day. It's like him taking on Trump or Boris Johnson. And all the actors were too scared to play the character. It was such a vicious attack on him. So Aristophanes, the playwright, had to play the role himself. And the mask is there partly to help the actors be anonymous and protect them so they can give a more vicious performance. Austin Powers Goldmember. It's referencing Goldfinger from the Bond movie. Greek comedy makes references to lots of other artworks, but obviously Goldmember is not referencing the finger. It's referencing another part of the body. Greek comedy is a fertility play. It's very rude. I go back to that parental advisory. Every word that you would never think you would be saying in class are in the play text, and you've got to get comfortable quoting them. All the stuff that your parents hope and dream you will never hear or experience or do is acted out on stage. So you've got to understand it's quite a grown-up course. You have been warned. Vigours teaches you the world of the hero. She teaches you the Odyssey in year 13. Incredibly famous poem. All these texts which are popping up on screen, they're all versions of the Odyssey. They've all been inspired by Homer's Odyssey. So there's films there, there's novels there, there's comics there. You know, Odyssey is a sci-fi retelling of it. Ulysses 31 is a 1970s French cartoon which turns it into a sci-fi space Odyssey. But they're all versions of the Odyssey. If you were to stand and read the Odyssey, it's 30 hours long, non-stop. One of the challenges of the course is you've got to digest that. I wanted to put a picture. You know, there's pictures of a python that's eating a cow or something, then sleeps for a month as it digests it. It's a bit like that. You know, you've got to actually just keep chipping away at it. There's an old saying, "How do you eat an elephant?" And the answer, one bite at a time. You've got to be disciplined. One of the challenges of my unit is we're looking at 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 different sources of different types. You've got to break them apart and put them together. One of the challenges of Vigours unit is you've got to digest this massive, solid, dense, heavy text. So unless you've got the study skills, unless you've got the discipline to keep chugging away at it, you know, you're going to fall behind. You're going to get anxious. So you've got to be a hard-working student, but you enjoy it, so you do the work. But anyway, Vigours teaches you the world of the hero. It goes on for 30 hours, but this talk's only going for about 10 minutes, so I must move on. More students.
We like classics because
Good essay skills.
friendship, and you get help with your personal statements. Do classics.
Yes, do classics. Year 13 unit, love and relationships. This is Sappho. Much debate about whether or not we showed you these pictures of Sappho's breasts, but our thinking was, if you can't handle the classical oil painting of a couple of breasts, the course is going to be too extreme for you, so don't sign up for it in the first place. Sappho, you know Sappho. She's one of the oldest writers. She's about 2,700 years old. She's one of the first female writers. The word lesbian is named after Sappho because she came from the island of Lesbos. Sapphic love is a description of lesbian love because of Sappho's name. She's also credited, by the way, with inventing the lyre, which is why you often see with pictures of the lyre musical instrument, and the plectrum. You know, the plectrum that you use to pluck the strings so you don't hurt your fingers. She invented that. And Sappho's really interesting. A, she's a good poet, but B, she's really interesting in terms of sort of heteronormalizing. That one of the Sappho poems we teach, in our translation, it says, "I'm smitten with love for a boy." The original Greek is, I'm overcome with desire for a young girl. Or possibly, I'm overcome with desire for a youth. And it's ambiguous whether it's a boy or a girl. But you can see the difference between smitten, which is sort of a gentle affection, and overcome with desire. So what you start to see there is the patriarchal stripping away of women's libido. Women aren't allowed to think about sex or talk about sex or yearn for sex. So overcome with desire becomes smitten. And it seems clear that Sappho was gay. She has a daughter, so she did get married and she'd have a child, but the most tender love poems seem to be between Sappho and other women. And yet, about 200 years after Sappho's dead, the story's put around that she commits suicide because she's in love with this butch male ferryman, and he doesn't love her, so she jumps off a cliff to kill herself. So, you know, you have all these debates about heteronormalization, all these debates about the suppression, the patriarchal suppression and systemic suppression of women's identity and women's feelings and stuff like that. So Sappho's really good for that. We don't just look at sort of lesbian sex, another big theme of the unit, homoerotic homosexual sex. One of the other units we look at is Plato's Symposium, which is basically a debate about what is better, heterosexual marriage or homoerotic relationships. And they basically come down in favor of homoerotic relationships, which seems very woke. It seems sort of very forward thinking, except one of the reasons they say that homoerotic relationships is better is because women are inferior. And so obviously 2 men in love together are better than a man weakening himself and diluting his male brilliance with a woman's inferior nature. And so what looks like quite a progressive text is actually built on a foundation of misogyny, possibly, arguably. So there's a nice discussion there. And then we look at Seneca, a Roman writer, who doesn't like desire at all. He only likes desire for producing children. And obviously, you know, homosexual relationships are not going to produce children, so he's completely against them. And then we look at Ovid, who's a Roman writer. He writes this poem called The Art of Love. Critics say it should really be translated as The Art of Sex. It's so rude it got him sent into exile. He was banished from Rome for writing it. And he doesn't mention homosexuality at all, because the whole point about his poem is how to snag a woman, how to snag as many women as possible. I think his attitude towards homosexuality is, great, hurrah, it's less rivalry, less competition for me when I go out cruising for the next girl to pick up. So, you know, the love, and it's not just sex. Everyone thinks lessons are just about sex. They're really not. It's just that you start listening when we talk about sex. It's also about relationships between parents and children. You know, it's love and relationships. It's about a poet's relationship with her audience, a poet's love for her muse and her art. But the unit is love and relationships, and it's everything from, you know, explicit sexuality through to familial relationships. So be alert to the content of the course. It's grown up. These were not texts written for children. These were not texts written for students. They didn't have the schools so much back then. There's a line in one of the plays we'll study: schoolboys have teachers, grown-ups have the poets. You know, these were plays and poems written to actually instruct and guide audiences, you know, in their real lives. So be alert to the course. Anyway, that's love and relationships. Oh, Vickers in year 13, I should have said, she does the Roman epic. So again, it just dovetails together, the Greek epic into the Roman epic. And I'm teaching about Roman poetry, and the emperor that commissions the Roman poetry is the same emperor that commissions you know, the epic poetry. So it dovetails very nicely. That's a picture of a tailor's dummy. Bespoke. Going back to those early, remember cyclical structure, you know this from GCSE language. Look for the ring structure. You know how at the start I flashed up our outstandingly good grades and our Oxbridge success and so on and so on. Other universities are available, they're just as good, go where you want to go. You get bespoke one-to-one treatment, you really do. I was here till 6 o'clock the other night because between 3:30 and 4:30, I was sitting down with a student, you know, who's going through some emotional difficulties, and we were working out what are the next steps forward. After that, I pootled downstairs to sit with a year 13 student who'd done an extra essay. And we were working on that, how to improve it in the next draft. And that was till 6 o'clock. I was in at 7:30 this morning, seeing a student with her UCAS statement and helping her make that better. I saw a student at break time to help them with some poetry analysis. I saw another student at lunchtime to set him an extra piece of work over the holiday because he's a bit behind, and this will help him get back on track. And I'm seeing a student after school who's applying for Oxbridge, and she's got to produce an essay for Oxbridge, and she wants to run it past me, see if she's on the right track. And Vickers is busy doing the same. So you get very good one-to-one support. You know, we're in early, we stay late. We will find time at lunchtime to see you. If you're having a problem with that, we'll help you with that. Having a problem with this, we'll help you with this. We're very good also identifying SEN needs that have slipped by. A lot of the students will come to us from other schools, and within about 6 weeks, we'll say, we think you might be dyslexic. Let's put you into dyslexic testing. It turns out they are. And they've gone through their GCSEs undiagnosed dyslexic. They've done their entrance test undiagnosed dyslexic, and we will pick that up and get the extra time and get you the laptop usage, you know, in exams. So we're very good at noticing those kind of, you know, those kind of sort of hurdles you might need to jump. So you do get very sort of bespoke one-to-one help and support, which helps you towards, you know, the excellent grades. But you get the excellent grades because it's a stimulating and provocative subject where we work you really hard, but you enjoy it so much that you do the work. I remember being on a group trip once, and one of the students was saying, classics is my hardest A level, but it's also the most fun. And I think that sums it up quite nicely, except I've got here, this is Kirsty. She's off at Cambridge this year.
Kirsty. I'm a year 13 student, and I've been studying classical civilization at UC for 2 years. And now, hopefully, I'm going to go off to university to study classics too. I've got an offer for Cambridge for classics, which is wow. Yeah. So, what have I enjoyed most about classics? Well, I know it sounds weird to say, but generally the lessons, they're so engaging. Miss Vickers and Miss Dean are just the best teachers. They're so good. They haven't paid me to say this, but the lessons are really, really good fun. Just the topics that we study. So Greek theatre is so engaging and so exciting. Some of the scenes are genuinely so dramatic. It's like watching a movie. It's crazy. It's really, really cool. Also, the epic unit is like nothing else I've studied at school, and it's something that genuinely has been useful in so many different areas of kind of like English and everything else, because the epics are so influential across all of kind of literature basically. And yeah, the love and relationships unit for year 13, that is probably my favourite bit of the course, because you just do so many different sources, like Ovid and Plato and Sappho and Seneca. They're just so interesting and just kind of gets like a bigger picture of classical society, which is really great. And also trips. So instead of doing like one big trip, Classic does like lots of little theatre trips. Just so great. They're so fun. They're generally some of the best memories of sixth form. They're really great, and it creates a really good community feel for classics, which is great. And it's really supported my other A levels. So I do English and history as well. And you'd be surprised with the amount of links, even like to history, like we're doing Civil War, and you know some of the main figures in Civil War compared to classical figures like Caesar or something like that. I actually make a Q on Caesar as well. So classics also can link to kind of extracurricular stuff, PQs in sixth form, which are really fun and exciting as well. And of course, for English, I barely can think of an English essay where I haven't mentioned something classical. Sometimes for the same for English teachers. No, I'm joking. But also in classics, you learn really well how to use critics, which is something I hadn't really encountered until I came to sixth form. So basically, critics are kind of like critical perspective on classical texts and basically just text. And it's something that, yeah, I can use throughout my different subjects and also in the future. English teachers always comment that, you know, they can tell who's done passive because their use of critics are pretty good, which is great. How to support my UCAS? Well, I'm actually hopefully going off to uni to study classics, and honestly, like everyone knows me as a bit of a classic nerd, but like I absolutely love everything classical. So classical civilization really sparked my interest in classics, and I basically, which leads to my next point, what I've done outside of school to further my studies. Well, I went on 2 summer schools at the end of year 12. So I went on the Eton Summer School, which is really good. It's a kind of focus in kind of state school. So all of the applicants from like state and grammar schools, which is really good because it's kind of really accessible. And there's basically, you can do any subject there, but I did classics and it was so amazing. It was to meet other people who are doing classics is great. And yeah, I met some really close friends there who are also hopefully going to be doing my course at university, at the same university I am, hopefully. And also then I went on to the Bryanston Summer School, which is absolutely epic. It's an ancient Greek summer school where you spend 2 weeks doing intensive Greek, which is just the coolest thing ever. And I got to be a part of doing the Bacchae in original Greek, which is crazy. It was also really super useful for both my UCAS, which is how I opened my UCAS without being a Bacchae, and also really good for the actual play itself, which is great. Also, well, most of us live in London, so definitely use resources that are in London. So the British Museum is completely free, and there's so many artifacts you can go and see at the British Museum that are just so relevant to the course. I mean, I think even last term, OCR itself had some kind of event where it was talking about all of the different artifacts there that relate to the course. There's just so much, especially to do with epic and theatre and everything. Really, I really recommend going to using the kind of resources that we have in London as well. And books. Books are the other thing that is super useful. So I'm pretty sure you might have been told reading this by Mr. D or something to read some of the books that I'm going to mention now. One of the best ones is Love, Sex and Tragedy. That gives you a real kind of sweeping knowledge of kind of lots of different things to do with the course, so theatre, but also stuff to do with love and relationships and a little bit of epic as well. And also, I really recommend getting the 3 textbook OCR recommends you get. They're really useful. And my personal favourite is Not All Dead White Men. This is probably my favourite non-fiction book I've read. It's amazing, really, really interesting perspective on kind of like classics and misogyny. I absolutely loved it. And yeah, there's lots of different books you can get out of classics. I really recommend Mary Beard as well. There's just such a like vast kind of like options of different books you can get to support your classical studies. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed being at UC for sixth form. It has a real community feel. The teachers are genuinely so supportive, especially Miss D and Miss Viggers. They've really helped me through with that academic and personal problems. That they're really, really amazing teachers, and yeah, you'll feel really supported both with like academic and also like personal problems. The kind of all the teachers from my subjects at UC were like that, and it's created like a really nice kind of environment because you know it's not always the easiest time sixth form, but UC really helps you kind of get through it, and I really appreciate all the help they've given me. My best tips of success. Well, I kind of thought everyone was being a bit dramatic, saying do stuff in year 12, but as in notes, but they're really not, because by the time you get to the end of year 13, you will not have time to kind of make detailed notes about like the epic like that. You need to start in year 12 writing proper notes. Maybe take some time over the summer term, because once you get to year 13, you're thinking all about UCAS, stuff like that. I'd really start making the notes on the topics you do in year 12 while you're in year 12 as well. And also tips, yeah, enjoy it. It's just the best course ever, and I wish I could take it all over again. It's such a fab course. You learn so much. You make so many great friends. So I made some of my closest friends on a classics trip where I went with a few people from the year above, and yeah, they're now some of my closest friends, and classics really bind people together. I think everyone who takes classics has like a real interesting kind of literature or history, and just the type of people you meet while studying classics is just so amazing and interesting. Yeah, I know I'm a bit biased, but I absolutely love classics. But yeah, and it has sparked my passion for all things classical, and yeah, like led me to apply to Cambridge and get an offer from Cambridge, which is fabulous. So yeah, So yeah, that's what I've got to say for Class A level. It's the best A level in my opinion. So yeah, good luck with the course and hope this helps.
Thank you. We weren't holding
My
we weren't holding her over her head. I just want to reassure you, she was, as she said, a absolute classic nerd. You don't have to go to summer schools. You don't have to learn Greek. Everything is in translation. You will pick up 5 or 6 Greek or Latin terms, but the texts are all in translation. It's basically a better English in some ways in terms of the quality of texts after cutback. So don't worry about that. You don't have to do as much as she did, but you will want to, because the course is really exciting and exhilarating. Do you not want to ask any questions? If not, I'm going to click stop.